Shalom. Now, if you don't know what the Alabama Baptist is, it's the Southern Baptist Association or Conference in Alabama. They put out a weekly newspaper-like thing called the Alabama Baptist. On the front page, they had a cover story, Sharing Jesus with Jews. And I'm going to link to Southern Jewish Life magazine's commentary on it and the original articles online, because this is absolutely stupid. It is. And what they've done is they've talked to some of these Messianic Jews, which are Christians who are defrauding people by claiming they're Jews. And they're claiming that even though they believe in Jesus, that Jesus was a Jew, so they're still Jews. And it's absolutely ridiculous. They are enemies of Judaism. They have rejected the God of their fathers. They have rejected the faith of their people, and they have converted to another religion. Yes, Jesus was a Jew, and his disciples were Jews. But that doesn't mean he was the Messiah, and it doesn't mean the Messiah is God, and it doesn't mean that somebody else can die for your sins. There's so much. And these people are ignorant of real Judaism often. They were born Jews in some cases, but they didn't know Judaism. So they were picked off by the Messianic Jews, who saw them as a trophy or whatnot, and thought they could witness and share Jesus to the Jews. And they weren't knowledgeable enough to counteract what they said. For instance, this person, he says this, and I'll use his own words. One day a Christian girl who eventually became his wife began talking to him about the Old Testament laws about sacrificial atonement for sin. She asked him how Jews atone for sin now, as they haven't sacrificed at the temple since it was destroyed in the 1st century. I began to think about how a Sanhedrin council has decided at that point it was okay not to sacrifice anymore, even though the law hadn't changed, and that going to the synagogue was never meant to count as sacrifice for sin. Now, when Solomon built the original temple, he asked God, he said, God, if your people can't come to this temple, allow them to face the direction of the temple and pray to you, and you hear their prayers and forgive them their sins. Right there before the temple was even created, the first temple, Solomon was saying that to God. It was recorded in Torah. Hosea said, God, let the prayers of our lips count as a sacrifice of bulls. Now, he's claiming that some Sanhedrin just made it up, and that, it was never meant to count for this atonement of sins. Well, first, and besides the fact that it clearly was, in the Tanakh, if you look, in Torah, if you look, the sacrifices were not always blood. You had sacrifices of grains, you had sacrifices of fruit, sacrifices of vegetables, not always blood. And the sacrifices, the blood sacrifices, were for cleanliness, ritual purification, but they were mainly for what? The unintentional sin. They were not to cover up intentional sins. If you do wrong to a person, you cannot turn around and kill an animal and make it okay. You have to go back to that person and ask their forgiveness. It is not between you and God, it is between you and this person. And you need their forgiveness. And somebody dying on a cross, or somebody giving their life for you, or whatever else, is not going to absolve you of personal responsibility. You are responsible for what you do. So That whole mindset is just totally alien to Judaism. And this person is running around and passing himself off as some kind of an expert in being able to tell people how to talk to Jews, and he doesn't know Judaism. And that's common with Messianic Jews, is they're ignorant of Judaism. And they won't claim that the Jews are the ignorant ones and this and that. They don't know about Judaism. Just because your penis has been circumcised does not make you a Torah scholar. You know, just because they had the bris doesn't mean you absorb something by osmosis and you all of a sudden know the Jewish religion. If your parents did not raise you in a religious household, you don't know Judaism any more than the average person out on the street knows Christianity. It doesn't work that way. So so what? You were born Jewish. Whoop-de-doo. That doesn't mean you know Judaism. And that's the case with many of these. But they say so much offensive stuff. Like the Ralph Messer desecrating the Torah scroll and saying because he has an Israeli passport that he can speak for the Jewish people, and all this other ridiculous stuff. Messianic Jews are ignorant about Judaism. They do not understand that they have forsaken their God, the God of their people, and have joined another religion. They don't understand. And yet they want to turn around and tell Jews that, hey, you can do this too. Well, no, you can't. And Southern Jewish Life Commentary goes into a lot of this stuff, and their reply and their commentary on this is really, really good. It says, how can there be Jewish atheists and not Jewish believers in Jesus? A piece wonders. Simple. An atheist is regarded as struggling over, questioning the existence of God, which is acceptable in Judaism, but has not left the Jewish people. The believer in Jesus has adopted a separate belief system that is foreign to Judaism. Therefore, they have taken themselves out of Judaism. They are no longer Jews. They have left Judaism behind. There is a fallacy that the only difference between Judaism and Christianity is over whether Jesus was Messiah. Judaism does not allow for belief in a human being as God, or that God can be divided in parts. Jews have a direct relationship with God and are not to separate ourselves from God by putting an intermediary in between. The Christians have this idea that the only way you can get to God is through Jesus. You never had to before. There are plenty of places in the Torah and the Tanakh where people commune directly to God. You didn't need Jesus. Plenty of places where they prayed to God and asked for forgiveness and were forgiven. You didn't need Jesus. David did it. He asked God to forgive him and God forgave him. It's two different mindsets. It's two different religions. You can't have God being three in one. You can't have it. God is one. Not three in one, not 18 in one. God is one. That's antithetical to Judaism. That's heretical to Judaism. You can't have God being in a body. Because if God is in a body somewhere, that means there is somewhere else He is not, which means God is not everywhere, which is antithetical to Judaism. We do not hold that people are born sinners because of original sin, which is a cornerstone in Christianity of why man needs Jesus to intercede on our behalf. No such thing as original sin. One of the prayers that we say, we thank God for giving us a soul that is pure. You created it, you fashioned it, you breathed it within us. One day you take it from us and restore it to us in the time to come. Thank you, God, for giving life to dead corpses. Or something similar to that. I was just pulling the translation off my memory. But somebody else, if they sin, you are not in sin because of them. It's not your responsibility. And again, sin, missing the mark. It's not some blight on your soul. It is you missing the mark. You doing something when you could have done something better. That is what sin is. It's not this physical thing that, a black spot on your heart. It is missing the mark. Not doing it as well as you could. When you do it, when you commit a sin, you ask the person you've sinned against to forgive you. You try to make it better. You don't do it again. You become a better person. Who needs to forgive you for that? Nobody, because the person you did it to has already forgiven you. You don't need God to turn around and say, okay, you're forgiven. That's not between you and God. So the sacrifice for unintentional sins and such, you were cleaned of all of that because it didn't include God. The only way it included God is that you were sinning against the image of God. So yes, just do your normal sacrifices, do your normal prayers, give charity even. And you wipe those things out because it's not an issue between you and God, it's an issue between you and people, and you've taken care of that. But anyway, while there is a sacrificial system in ancient Judaism, a blood sacrifice has never been a requirement for forgiveness. I already went over that. Good and evil both were created by God. There isn't a cosmic battle of God versus a different evil entity. In Judaism, the rarely mentioned figure of Satan is subject to limitations God imposes. In Christianity, Satan is an evil god. You don't just have a good god, you've got an evil god too. And they're battling it out. And eventually the good god is supposed to beat the evil god. So you've got two different gods there. Well, one of them's three gods and the other's one god. So you got four different gods there. In Judaism, you've got one God. And he's God over all. If you read in the book of Job, Satan goes up to God before God's throne and discusses things with him. If he was thrown out of heaven, that would not be going on. But Satan goes up and he discusses things with God because he works for God. In Judaism, he's almost a comical figure at times. When they blow the shofar, the horn at Rosh Hashanah, it's supposed to confuse him to where he can't present his case against you to God. He's the accuser. So it's two different religions. Something else they say in here in the Southern Jewish Life magazine. I want to read this to sort of tie up my quoting from it, and I'll list all the articles. From our perspective, saying our faith or very core of being is deficient needs to be replaced isn't exactly being respectful. These same missionaries would have choice words for a Muslim who made a similar effort towards them. Trying to reach us through redefining our faith and replacing it with a form of Christianity that wears a yarmulke and sprinkles in Hebrew words is identity theft. Ironically, Birmingham's Messianic congregation is holding a program on identity theft in April. Insert your punchline here. And it goes on to how no Jewish group, no Jewish organization list Messianic Jews as Jews in their community resources. They don't even consider them Jews. They can't count in the group of 10 for prayer. They are not Jews. They are Christians. And no matter how much they want to lie to people and say, oh, well, the Jewish community is accepting of us or anything of the sort, they are Christians. They have forsaken Judaism. And most of them were not even Jews to start with. And the ones that were, they weren't raised in Judaism many times. They don't understand it, so somebody else went to them, and because they didn't know, they fell in the trap. But I will link to these articles and you can see it for yourself. But it's just absolutely ridiculous, and the problem isn't the Southern Baptists. The problem is these charlatans masquerading as Jews and going to people who don't know any better, the Christians who don't know any better, and feeding them these lines, because the Southern Baptists look at these people, oh, well, they look like Jews, they must know something about Judaism. And so they're responsible for the persecution for, they're almost anti-Semitic in some regards, and they're responsible for this type of attitude towards Jews, because they don't understand. And they're twisting and lying and doing all this against Jews and Judaism. But I don't see it as a Southern Baptist's fault that they've been, run over by these con men. It is this so-called Jews for Jesus, Messianic Judaism, this thing, this charade that is at fault. We have good relations with the Christians. When our synagogue was being remodeled, we stayed in Southside Baptist Church on Friday nights and Saturday mornings, and we held our services there. On Sundays they used it, and until our synagogue was renovated, we've hosted churches that did the same thing in our synagogue. They used it on Sundays while they were looking for a building or whatever. On Rosh Hashanah, they loan us their parking lots in neighborhood churches, and we're able to park in their parking lots for our high holy days. We've had a Catholic priest come and speak at our high holy days. So we have a good relationship with Christians. It's just sometimes there are problems. And these Messianic Jews, these Christian charlatans, they create problems wherever they go. Shalom.